And also the idea of essentially came from me going and being audience at Have I Got News For You, and kind of thinking actually we should do stuff which is broadcast, but we get to have a special studio audience while we do it. So it's kind of that kind of way around. So these will be streamed on YouTube live and then kind of sit there. Wait for 1:15 on the dot pretty much so that we can have people who are watching this stream. Do you think we have a guest at the other end, hopefully? Amazing. I'm getting thumbs up, which I think is a good thing. I think it's a thumbs up. Well, thank you. Noticed the typos? No? There's a page of brilliant ones, which are very relevant to tonight. But yeah, the festival's in its 7th year, so we started I think that means live. Right. Thank you very much. Welcome to the festival tomorrow. Welcome to our studio audience here, and also welcome to people watching online. So the festival tomorrow is just kicking off, and we're really, really privileged and pleased to be partnering with the Science Innovation Park, and particularly to be in the Hawking building here, which is the home of the Science Museum Group's collections. And the Science Museum Group is a number of museums across the country, including obviously the Science Museum in London, this site, museums such as the Museum Science Industry in Manchester, and importantly for tonight, the National Museum of Science and Media up in Bradford. So we've linked it up with some of those museums to create some of these events. So if you've got tickets for the tour later, we'll be kind of taking you on that. And for people online, there is someone who's going to be monitoring the comments. So if you have questions not for me, I don't know the answers, but for our speaker, do put them in the comments box and someone let me know so you can join in the Q&As as well. So we want the online audience to be able to participate as much as possible too. So tonight we've got, I'm really pleased, we're going over to Bradford for the Curator. So Lewis Pollard, who's the Curator of TV and Broadcast, he's at the National Museum of Science and Media. He is speaking to us live from Bradford tonight. So let's, with much trepidation, see if he's there online.
Good evening from Bradford, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here at your festival.
Thank you very much. Is that a background? That looks kind of suspiciously like it could be here.
I do spend a lot of my life living in the museum, and we do have a wonderful store on site, but I'm afraid this one is just a background today. I'm not actually in the museum itself. They wouldn't let me stay this late into the evening.
I won't quiz you on what is behind you.
I don't know. I could talk for days about some of these things. I mean, we have in our collection, as the TV curator, I'm going to focus on the things I'm more familiar with. But there's this wonderful, that side of me, Curator television, this round thing here that was made in the 1960s, which a lot of people believe was made to sort of coincide with space fever and the moon landing to look like an astronaut's helmet. But the actual designer of them said that they were inspired by houses they saw in Italy, which I can't say I've ever been to Italy, nor have I seen houses in that shape, but that is the story they go with. But it's definitely one of the more unique objects in our collection. It's just this beautiful round thing, and inside is basically empty. It takes up so much physical space, but the internal electronics take up no space, so it's really easy to move around.
This is all form over function, which is kind of Italian engineering, I'd probably say. Having owned a Fiat, which is a fix it again tomorrow kind of car. So we will probably at one point, we might quiz you on everything behind you. So tell us the reason why we're doing this event now, this interview now, because you've got plans for Bradford. Just kind of, let us know what is it you're doing there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So for many of you might be familiar that Bradford was City of Culture 2025. So we've had a lot to celebrate over the last year. The museum reopened after a period of being closed for refurbishment. We introduced some brand new permanent galleries called our Sound and Vision galleries that are now free and open to visit. But we're not stopping there. And the thing I'm going to be talking to you most about this evening is our upcoming temporary exhibition, which is all about the technology behind the Eurovision Song Contest. And that opens in May, 1 week ahead of the actual broadcast itself. So we're very well into the delivery phase now. We're building things, we're putting things into showcases, and we're really excited to be putting this together for people to come and see in May.
So how long have you been working on that project?
Oh, it's been about 3 years now. It usually takes us 3 years from initial concept all the way through to delivering an exhibition of this sort of scale. It's going to be in 2 separate spaces in the museum. We have 2 galleries on 2 different floors. And so we're splitting our exhibition into 2 halves, really. One half will go into Gallery 1 and one appropriately into Gallery 2. So yeah, it's been a long journey. It's not just me. There's a whole bunch of people behind the exhibition working in our exhibitions team, as well as our conservators and dozens of people who've all had a hand putting this together. So we're really excited to finally be able to show what has been pretty much the bulk of our lives for the last 3 years.
And so what is that process like? Who do you work with? Is it just kind of internal in the museum? Or do you work with the Eurovision organisation? Or
it can really depend on sort of the different kinds of exhibitions we're working on. For this one, we are in partnership with the European Broadcasting Union. They've been incredibly helpful with putting us into contact with all sorts of people and organisations across Europe and helping us source content to put into this exhibition. So as a museum, our exhibitions are always really dictated by our objects, and that's how this exhibition came about. We know that we have a world-class collection of broadcasting history at our fingertips, and we wanted to showcase that a little bit more, and Eurovision seemed like the perfect way to do that, especially because, as many of you may not be aware, 2026 will be the 70th edition of the Eurovision Song Contest, so perfect timing for us. And yeah, we're just really excited to be taking people on a sort of a hidden journey of the Eurovision Song Contest. Many people will be fans, or maybe people who watch it every year. We've had a lot of interesting discussions with people who say, I'm not a fan, but I do watch it every year. So trying to figure out what they mean by fan if that's not a fan.
Yeah.
But what we're really showcasing is the technology that got us here, and how the Eurovision Song Contest has always been a testbed for new technologies or new ideas. And we're also really delving into what is behind the scenes. We love behind the scenes here at the museum. Some of you tonight, when you go on your tour, will be seeing behind the scenes of our stores. We want to highlight, the engineers, the sound mixing artists, all the people who come together to make this huge broadcasting event happen every year in a different place with a different team, and really make something that is remarkable and has endured for 7 decades as the whole landscape of television and broadcasting has changed.
Yeah, we love to complain about it, don't we? We love to kind of mock Eurovision and complain and say, and like this thing, I'm not really a fan. But I mean, we all kind of either very explicitly love it, and it's kind of like a religious fervour, or kind of secretly love it, and kind of, I'm just going to tune in so I can like make fun of the outfits and kind of say how awful I think it is, but I'm going to tune in. I've kind of I decided to make that switch, and we go whole hog and do a Eurovision party every year. There's fancy dress. It's not always a pretty sight because some of the costumes look less good on me than they do on the acts. But I think the whole nation does kind of get involved, and I guess that's kind of true across, Europe and beyond now. So I think I want to get into kind of how you've created and created the different areas. So the way you've kind of curated the gallery experience, you've kind of chosen a kind of different technology for each bit. I mean, can you talk about actually how it started, so when it started, and kind of how that happened? Because it's like a massive undertaking that, trying to get people to cooperate on the shape of bananas apparently is difficult and controversial. But I mean, on something like this, it must have been, a huge, huge challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And the first interesting fact that we share with people that, as I've talked with many people, fans and not fans alike, they're not aware of, is that Eurovision was initially conceived as a television network. It wasn't as a song contest. So after the Second World War, as many of the European nations were sort of rebuilding and exploring new technologies, a lot of them were getting into the idea of television as a technology. But it was, and continues to be, an incredibly expensive undertaking. You have some of the large players like the BBC and like Germany were big hitters in those days, but a lot of other nations couldn't afford to make television work at a sense of scale, especially countries that might have mountainous regions, for example. And so a number of nations got together and thought, what if we shared technology, we shared ideas, expertise, and costs, and we built a television network that spanned all of Europe, a European television network, or Eurovision. And once this was begun, and it took many years to sort of get it off the ground, and many challenges about trying to change formats or change definitions across national borders and things like that. But once the network was sort of in place, the question then became, what do we put on this now? What are we going to show that's going to appeal to someone in the UK and France and Germany and Spain all at the same time? And it was someone's great idea to base off the San Remo Song Festival. What if we had a song festival that celebrated all of Europe and had different European countries participating and competing against each other? And that's how the Eurovision Song Contest was born. And initially, it was just a pitch. It was, what if we do this for this one year? And maybe if it's exciting enough, we'll do it next year as well. And no one knew that it was going to take off and become this massive media empire that it has become now. So that's the first really interesting thing that we're talking to people about. Like nowadays, if you say Eurovision, everyone says song contest. They don't think of the television network. And we have, for example, in our collection that we're going to be showing off, a massive map from the early 1960s of all the different television networks as they're feeding into each other, and all the different relay stations and transformers and other bits of equipment to change the signal to make it possible to go from one place to another. And it was such a remarkable achievement. We have a film in the exhibition from the BBC at the time talking about just how difficult it was beaming a signal across the channel, and that when this was happening in the late 1950s, it was absolutely revolutionary. And it's something that today we're much more comfortable with. It's something we may not even really think about, that we can have a signal going from one country to another all at the same time with low latency. So yeah, that's the first wow factor that we're going to be having for people who come to visit.
I mean, it's kind of weird to think that we'd even worry about this, but it actually just getting across the Alps with networks, with signals was a challenge back then.
We have a couple of wonderful photos from an archive in Sweden of it looks like shacks in the mountains, absolutely dotted with aerials and pieces of equipment, and people bringing up cables up giant sleds. It was an absolutely huge undertaking. It's really remarkable that anyone managed to buy into this concept, because it sounds too ludicrous to make possible.
How did it get its name?
As in the Eurovision Song Contest, exactly.
Yeah.
From that, because it was the Eurovision television network, and that's what Eurovision meant. And it was the idea of making a song contest. And again, because no one thought it was going to be this massive thing, they didn't come up with a unique name for it, and that's how we end up with the Eurovision Song Contest.
Okay, I mean so I think it was just the massive cooperation, huge undertaking across Europe. I think I saw. We're obviously blessed to be here in Swindon, and one of the things that we hate here, that we're quite well known for, is the Magic Roundabout, which was originally called the County Ground Intersection or something really mundane, and the Magic Roundabout was just a nickname people gave to mock it, and that kind of stuck. And I think Eurovision was kind of similar, wasn't it? It was kind of a journalist called it Eurovision. That's kind of where the name came from, I think, from some of the notes you sent over. But it was, these kind of little kind of nicknames kind of end up sort of sticking, don't they? So once they kind of got that working, I mean, was that it, or what was the next thing they had to get across? What was the next challenge?
Yeah, so I think one thing that we're really showcasing, that across 7 decades of the song contest existing, it has never been satisfied to stay in place, and it's always been trying the next thing that will get more people interested, or that will showcase a new form of broadcasting. So one thing that I may as well mention here is the way that we've structured this exhibition is, as you say, we've taken one technological innovation per decade of the song contest and used that as our starting point to then build outwards from. So first we have the Eurovision network itself, and next we talk about colour broadcasting in the 1960s, which again is this remarkable thing that seems like it would almost be more trouble than it's worth, because the UK has one colour standard system, parts of Europe have a different colour system, some countries don't get colour at all, so you have to be broadcasting in black and white as well. But it was this idea of trying to make the contest seem even more spectacular, that everyone at home could be seeing what it looked like in dazzling colour. And another thing that people may not be so familiar with when you look at the contest today, it is this huge event and people do get completely dressed up. But in the early days, it was seen as a very formal and quite highbrow event that if anyone was attending, they would be expected to wear, full-on suit jackets or beautiful dresses, or something to showcase the gravitas of this. It wasn't necessarily seen as a popular entertainment program. This was highbrow Europe showcasing the breadth of its music. And so I think that's what's really interesting, and as a driver of Eurovision as a sort of a way of spreading culture, but also showcasing, the majesty of all these different songs, all these different performances.
When you were saying about broadcasting in black and white, I kind of can't imagine Eurovision working in black and white, because it's all about, colour, essentially. It's all about the kind of fabulous kind of outfits and staging and the costumes, all that sort of stuff. It just makes me wonder if were they wearing black and white formal wear, or were we just watching in black and white TV? It seems like it's an interesting one to kind of look back on. But I think that's got to be a big part of it. And I know you're doing, really you're talking about that technology, but do you touch on the other stuff too? I mean, will there be some of the great outfits and that sort of thing, or are we just kind of, will it all be bits of metal boxes?
No, you're absolutely right. It wouldn't be a Eurovision exhibition without some sequins. That's something we said from the very beginning. So we do have a couple of examples of original costumes. I won't spoil them just yet. I think that's something that people should come see in person.
Do we get any hints?
So we have a UK-based act. Not one that was particularly popular at the time, but has sort of loomed large in Eurovision sort of culture since. It's the thing where at the time people think, oh no, it's too kitsch, it's rubbish. And then actually as time goes on, you go, yeah, that was peak Eurovision, absolutely perfect. So we have that, but we also we're really interested in exploring sort of the fandom of Eurovision. You know how it is so popular with people in many different ways. And one thing that we're really pleased to be doing is we're working with fans across the UK and Europe to showcase some fan-made materials, and that includes people who've made their own costumes, whether that's a ball gown made of flags of all nations, so they can support everyone at the same time, or replicas of famous costumes that were done that were performed in at Eurovision. So yeah, there's a really nice mix, and yeah, we were quite conscious that even though it is a technology story we're telling, Eurovision is a popular music contest, and people want to see that reflected, and so we have. A lot of opportunities where you can watch some of the greatest performances of their era. There'll be a chance to see things like costumes, and there are even opportunities for people to get up on a little stage and sing some of their favorite Eurovision songs. So we want to put you in the seat of not only going behind the scenes of the song contest, but being in front of the camera and seeing if you have what it takes to be the next Eurovision star.
You're essentially going to have a karaoke booth in the museum. That sounds amazing.
Yes, it's sort of thing that we had to push quite strongly for, because a lot of people thought karaoke in a museum, that'll never work. And a number of years ago, I made an exhibition about music and brains, how music inspires us to move, create, and dance. And they wouldn't let us have a karaoke booth for that. So I'm really pleased that for this one, we're going to have, and it's not just a booth, it is a whole half of the gallery. So anyone who feels confident can step up on stage.
So you're not even kind of soundproofed in your own little booth. Everyone else from that gallery is going to hear you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it also ties in, we have a really fabulous interactive, we call it the Nil Pois Jukebox. So people might be familiar with songs that have received absolutely 0 points from Eurovision. There's about 40 of them across history.
How many in the UK?
Only a couple. We do have one. It's a very infamous one from 2003, where the song itself, arguably, is not very bad, but the singer performed it off key during the performance, and so they got nil points. That's one that is a little bit controversial, shall we say. But we want people to have the experience of what it's like to be a Eurovision judge, whether you want to be a televoter or you want to be part of the jury. And so we've put every song that's received 0 points into a playlist, and then you get a chance to listen to clips of them and vote whether you think yes, this belongs at the bottom, or whether you think it's been unfairly maligned and actually should have got more than it has. And so by the end of the exhibition, when it closes next year, we'll have this really interesting data of where people will think that actually that song didn't get a fair shake, or rather that song absolutely is terrible and should never have been at Eurovision.
I just can't imagine being the performer, having gone through the humiliation of getting nil points in the competition, and then also after a year of the public voting in your museum, still getting nil points. I mean, that would be devastating.
We're making some enemies with this exhibition.
So we've kind of gone the network. We've kind of made that leap into colour with a kind of working out. It's almost like currency exchanges, just with colour codes and things. So what was next? Is it kind of that move? No longer cables, satellite. Is that where we get to?
Yes, actually, satellite is the next section. So this was not only just being able to transmit to countries without the use of like traditional cables, but it's also when we see Eurovision really going global, that it can be broadcast to anywhere in the world at any time. And the European Broadcasting Union, who I say we're working in partnership with on this exhibition, they were really instrumental in early satellite broadcasting experiments. So there was a program called Our World, where lots of nations clubbed together to make content that could be beamed pretty much anywhere in the world, and the EBU were really instrumental in making that happen. And so of course they were then interested in using that to reach more people across the world. And as we've seen, Eurovision has only grown more prevalent across the entire world. We've seen nations such as Australia joining in Eurovision, and it's really become a worldwide phenomenon, when originally it was just a few countries in Europe clubbing together to have like an interesting song contest evening. But yeah, now is this absolutely massive undertaking that happens every year.
Yeah, and we get to kind of mock the idea of Australia being part of Europe, which is part of the that's just become part of the tradition now, mocking non-European countries.
And it's a really interesting point you make that, especially in the UK, there can be a lot of derision towards Eurovision. People saying, oh, it's not for us, or we never do well. An interesting fact is that the largest Eurovision fan community, the OGAE, or the British part of it anyway, it is bigger than anywhere else in Europe. There are more people who define themselves as Eurovision fans and big fans of that in the UK than anywhere. So I always find it really interesting when, newspapers say like, oh yeah, the UK, they don't care about Eurovision. We care about it more than anyone possibly.
Yeah, we can't vote for ourselves. I think that's maybe the problem. That's kind of where we're going wrong. Um, so yeah, okay. So what kind of came next after that? So we've now included the entire world through this. Where do we go next?
The next innovation that we're really focusing in on is the development of microphone technologies, because there's a really interesting story in how that has changed how Eurovision performances actually happen. So in the very early days, microphones were on stands with big long cables, and a singer had to be very much based at that stand and performing into the microphone. You see occasionally people doing like some funky hand movements whilst they're there, or maybe a bit of swaying or waving, but they're really rooted to the spot. And then as time goes on, microphones become more portable, and we even see the introduction in the 1980s of wireless microphones, which gives the then performer an incredible range of motion. And so we'll have like videos next to actual microphones from our collection of performances suddenly incorporating a lot more dance. You think of your likes of Loreen, who always has an amazing like dance choreography going on to her performances, but it frees up a much more expressive way of doing your Eurovision performance, and it's a really interesting thing to sort of dive deep into. That if the microphone technology hadn't changed, then we'd still be seeing performances very much in the same way. It would be static, and you might have some dancers in the background, but your performer would have to be in one place. And it's also really freed up how the contest can be administered, how the sound engineers can go about it. There's a really quite famous story in sound engineering for Eurovision that in the early days when microphones were a bit more portable but were still wired so they could be carried around on stage, you'd have to put a lot of like tape on the floor to say where different stands and different bits of equipment should go. And there's one year where some performers were bored whilst they were waiting to go on stage, and they were just picking up all this like dirt and rubbish they found on the floor, and they actually pulled up all of the little microphone tags. And so suddenly the sound engineers had to like hurry up and get onto stage again and try and fix everything up before the performance actually started.
Amazing. I don't know if I'm allowed to ask you this, really. Might be putting you on the spot. You're kind of throwing in, so you're getting nervous now, and you should. You start throwing in the names of performers, right? And different things happen. You're curator of TV and broadcast, right? So you are, and I mean this as a compliment, a nerd.
Absolutely.
Were you also a massive Eurovision fan before this, or have you now just been so immersed in the 3 years that you've become one? Where were you on that I think this talk is a funny mix, because it's about Eurovision, which is all flamboyant, but it's about the nerdery of Eurovision. So kind of where were you in that spectrum, or were you just that perfect blend, or you were a convert?
Now, the great thing about working in a museum such as mine is that you're always learning new things, and sometimes that might be against your will. No, I've always been, since I was a child, my family would watch it every year. It's the sort of thing that I watched with my friends when we got into our teens, and it's been really key in sort of, I suppose, community building with people I know, with like making new friends at like university or making friends within the queer community and such. It's always been very important to me, ever since I think when I was studying, I studied a lot of languages at my school, and Eurovision was always a big hit at that point in the year because you get all the language classes together and watch together, and maybe do some voting and maybe try and do a bit of translating of songs. So I've always been really interested. But the technological side of things, how it's all put together, this is things that I've really only come across during the course of making this exhibition. And so, yeah, it's been absolutely a wonderful journey in learning that not only is this a massive cultural event and a massive broadcasting event, but it has been so key in driving technological change over time as well as cultural change. And yeah, I think I'm coming out of this experience as a super fan.
Amazing. Have you got tickets yet for Vienna?
Oh, I wish.
Okay, yeah. Okay, anyone got any connections?
Wait, actually, to that point, I would say, I think the true way of experiencing Eurovision is through a television, because it is a song contest meant to be broadcast into your home. You get the mediation of the camera, the different angles, what's going on. I've never been in person. My colleague and counterpart, who is working on this exhibition with me, she has. And she says the atmosphere is absolutely electric and it is really wonderful, but it can also be a lot of standing around and waiting for things to happen. So maybe it's a bit easier if you're at home. You can have, your friends around. You can get your little bingo card together or do some scoring, have some snacks. But yeah, I think the true way of experiencing Eurovision should be through television. But maybe that is just my nerdy side saying it.
Yeah. Okay. So okay, fine. I'm gonna look down on the people who are there live because we're experiencing it properly, and they're just there to make the atmosphere for us. So that's good. I kind of the next bit because I've got the notes is the bit that we kind of want. I think everyone kind of loves to debate and hate the most. So yeah, do you want to talk about voting? Because it is the most controversial and hideous part. And I don't know if you can get into the controversies, but certainly, I mean, from 1956 onwards, how any of this happened all at once across Europe is kind of crazy. But what goes into that?
Yeah, it is a really interesting process, and another fact that a lot of people are not aware of is that Eurovision has had different scoring systems across its history. It's not just been juries and televoting, and that has had its own issues. It means how we end up with things like 0 point or 12 points as well. But like there was the infamous year in 1969 that had four separate winners because of the way that the voting system worked, and then it had to be changed to make sure that could never happen again because it was seen as so controversial that you could have multiple winners at the same time. And so there was always tweaking going on with the contest. And yeah, as the contest was entering sort of the 90s and early noughties, there was this sort of change in the cultural perspective of Eurovision. As I mentioned earlier, it was seen as a very formal event, but that was sort of changing, and people were interested in going to see it as an interesting evening of entertainment, even if you weren't someone wearing a dicky bow and you've been invited by the Queen or something like that. It became more this popular music experience. And so the EBU, as they had grown more globally significant, wanted to give that power back to people to say, what do you think is worth voting for? And so the exact percentages of jury votes versus public voting has changed, as things have been tweaked since then. But I think it's a really powerful tool to let people have their opinions known and say, yes, actually, we're really interested in this. And of course, like you say, there are controversies. Every year you hear about voting blocks, people saying that, the UK and Ireland always vote for each other and things like that. There's a lot of interesting debate about that, and actually quite a lot of interesting, like scholarly interest in that. And I think the most compelling thing I've seen towards that rationale of voting blocks is that countries that are nearby to each other often share a lot of cultural touch points. Our taste in music might be similar to Ireland's taste in music, and so an act from one of those countries might seem more in line with our sensibilities, and that's maybe why it can be more popular with these countries. I'm not saying that's the entire rationale for it, but I mean, I always find that, like I say, I studied a lot of languages in high school, particularly French, and I do have a great fondness for a lot of the French acts. They're not often very good, but I have a great fondness for them anyway. I think one of my favorites is Les Fatales Picards. I want to say that's maybe 2007. Not a great song, but I love it.
He's just showing off his kind of Eurovision creds there, isn't he? Just dropping names with the year. I think we already believed you anyway, so it's kind of fine. But so when you cover that in the gallery, to what extent are you covering the controversies and all that sort of stuff? And to what extent, so the televoting, are you covering the technology? Have you got bits of kit for that? And is that kind of country specific, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's quite a surprising thing because, as is true with a lot of broadcasting history, even the things behind me, is that equipment was used for a particular broadcast and then it was reused again and again and again. And so often that specific context of, this was used in the 1999 Eurovision Song Contest isn't really preserved because it's working equipment. And it can mean it can actually be quite difficult. We have in our collection some of the earliest cameras used at the BBC when they first began their broadcasts in the 1930s. But there's remarkably little information recorded by the BBC on what the camera was being used for, when and where, because it was just another day in the office. It was just making these things happen. And so televoting is part of that in the sense that the equipment being used was, telecoms equipment, and no one thought, oh, this is incredibly special. We need to preserve this and give it to a museum. And so the way that we're going about it is we're showing off an actual telephone, the sort of thing that the people who were voting would have been more familiar with. This is the user side of it rather than seeing a big bulky piece of equipment and going, oh yeah, I bet when that had electricity it did things. It's what was the tactile experience of voting on the telephone. And rather shudderingly, with some of our younger visitors, they're quite horrified to see things like, a telephone with buttons on it or a telephone that had to be plugged into a wall in order to work. Uh, we often say we're a museum of media history. Media history moves very fast, and so when you see something from your life in the museum, that doesn't mean that you're old. It means that technology has moved on very fast. It's what I say to comfort myself.
Yeah, it is scary how quickly that becomes a thing. Yeah, I did work for a museum where someone came in and asked if they could swap their own home appliance for the object in the museum because theirs had stopped working and we weren't using ours, which I thought was
Wow.
pretty genius move. It wasn't allowed, but the logic stacked up. So yeah, you do start seeing yourself in museums more and more. Yeah, so you basically kind of do that and then just build the story around it, which is kind of a really interesting kind of point for how you create museum galleries. But so where do we go next from there? And remind me what decade we're in now. When was televoting brought in?
Oh God, you're putting me on the spot now. I want to say 1997, but honestly,
I was going for decade, but I mean that's going
okay,
for the year is good.
watch with Eurovision facts. Sometimes it's hard to sort them out from each other.
So where do we go next after televoting? What's the next part of the gallery?
So the next, we talk a little bit about HD broadcasting in the 2000s, which was a remarkable step change. But I think for the sake of talking here, I'm going to say the next big one we talk about is actually LED flooring, which is something that people are a little bit surprised about when we've been giving them previews. So as Eurovision became, ever bigger and always wanting to seek out the next interesting technology, the next thing that's going to wow people, flooring and walling has become, like interactive walling, has become an incredibly vital part of Eurovision. So you can have your big video graphics of dragons, or you can have, the illusion of you're walking on the walls on stage. And so that's really important in terms of a performance perspective. But one thing we're also focusing in on is, again, that behind the scenes of how Eurovision performance is made, because the great thing about having an LED floor is you can map your floor essentially on a tablet, and every prop that you need to put somewhere, you can make digital markers appear right when you need to be changing over the stage. So one thing that people might not be familiar or might not be aware of is during the Eurovision performances, when they have those postcards of a country, when it goes to a video and it's like, oh, isn't Spain lovely? And here's our performer, and it's giving you like some interesting facts. That maybe 30 seconds is all the time that is to completely change over the stage. Make sure that all the previous performers are off the stage. Usually there's someone who goes by with like a mop and a sweeping brush to make sure there's no detritus on the stage. And then you've got to put props on the stage. And, if that is a piano that's on fire, or if it's a huge rock, or if it's a giant hamster wheel, as we've seen in the past, that's not an awful lot of time. And so having the LED floor say, like, that prop has to go over here, makes that changeover so much more seamless and easier for the people behind the scenes. And one interesting thing we're doing in the exhibition to show this is we've got an interactive, which is that on a much smaller scale. It's like a little floor screen where you are moving props into areas as fast as you can. And so we've got some interestingly designed props. I won't spoil what they are yet, but some things that are classic Eurovision style things that then visitors can be doing that. Because again, one thing we're really keen to explore is the behind the scenes of how the Eurovision performance is put together. And indeed, that's one of the main missions of our museum. We call it Inspiring Futures, and that is making people aware of, all of the roles and all of the jobs and all the careers that go into making the content that we're so used to seeing today, whether that's photography, film, television, video games, and so on. That's the thing. That is our main mission as a museum. So letting people have the chance to say, oh yeah, I love being a runner, and I love being able to put all these things together, or I want to do some sound mixing myself. That is our mission to people.
I guess that's the whole hidden side, isn't it? I mean, I experienced a tiny bit of that. We kind of run a festival that happens, as far as the public concerned, over a week or so. But, you're working on it for like months and months and months. And there's all this stuff that goes in, We've got this incredible studio being built at the back by people, and it's the amount of stuff that goes into it. And but for Eurovision, it's kind of an entire industry or set of industries that are kind of essentially being created by the fact that Eurovision exists. I mean, there's a company called Leviathan just near here that builds a lot of the staging, I know, and they go around, and there's companies doing these things all over Europe who then kind of pitch up, wherever Eurovision is happening, to kind of with real sort of specialisms that have been developed only as a result of the contest itself. So yeah, I guess it must be. I think being there Clearly, it's better to watch it on TV. Take your argument. But I think being there to see the behind the scenes and see that machine must be incredible. So I guess in the gallery, we're getting a glimpse of that behind the scenes. I'm hoping we don't have to do any risk assessments or any kind of other kind of health and safety training in order to move your stuff around. But I mean, it's I'm going to work out whether that's going to be more or less fun than the karaoke. But it does sound amazing and a different kind of take than what I'd expect. So yeah, LED floors, huge amount of staging. We're kind of getting up to sort of present day in your decade now, aren't we? Because we've kind of done sort of 2000s. So where do we go from there?
Yeah, so that is the really interesting thing that we're trying to explore. What is next for Eurovision? And it's one of those things that's really hard to predict because Eurovision is it's a behemoth. It's a monster that will see anything new and will essentially eat it and trying to absorb it into itself to explore new things. And something that we're showcasing in the exhibition is a thing called projection mapping. That's something that could be used where essentially you are having a projection onto a surface or object, and it is mapped to that object so you can do interesting things with it. That can be done like, on the front of buildings to play a game of Pac-Man. We've seen that in the past. In Eurovision context, it's often done on performers' clothing, so you can have this wonderful, like, it seems like larger than life performance that's happening, and the performer's costume is ever changing whilst that's going on as well. That's the sort of thing that Eurovision sees being done elsewhere and says we can do that and we can do that bigger. But in terms of technology, one of the things we're looking at in the very near future, because we're quite aware that if you start looking too far into the future, you get into things like flying cars territory where you go, oh yeah, maybe it'll happen, but maybe not, is the practical application of things like 5G. And so one big issue with Eurovision as it's come to be in the current day and age is that it uses up a huge amount of the electromagnetic spectrum. You have so many wireless microphones, so many wireless cameras, all beaming their information around that you kind of run out of digital space. And it gets to the point that when journalists have gone into the arena, they're told you can't use a wireless microphone because that part of the spectrum is already allocated to something else. And it's become a huge issue with trying to scale up Eurovision beyond what it already is. 5G is a much more efficient use of that spectrum space. And we're also seeing innovations such as we're going to have something on display called Network in a Box. This is an experimental thing that's being lent to us by the University of Strathclyde, which we're really excited to work with, which is something that can essentially give you more of that spectrum and give you a bit more flexibility in how you're broadcasting. It's something they've been experimenting on with putting into light aircraft so they can follow the Tour de France into the mountains and still give you a crystal clear signal when you're watching at home. So that's the next big thing that we're seeing being trialed right now. It's not maybe the most performatively exciting thing, but I think it's really key in Eurovision continuing to get bigger and bigger because one thing that we're displaying a lot of in this exhibition are cameras. So in the early sections, we have like one big TV camera, and there'd be maybe three of them at different angles in an auditorium, giving Eurovision from three separate angles. Nowadays, they're up to 20 or more types of cameras, and that can include cameras that drop from the ceiling, cameras that are mounted to people called steady cameras that they're moving around the stage, or cameras on cranes at different angles. And the sheer amount of editing that goes on live to make that possible is absolutely incredible. And one thing that we're showcasing in a form of a video is a piece of software called Live Edit, where essentially you can see in real time as basically bars go across the screen, different cameras being selected to get that perfect shot to get people at home really interested in what they're seeing. And there's actually an interactive where visitors can give it a go themselves and try and be that video editor. So yeah, as Eurovision continues to sort of look to the future and look to expand, it's probably about getting a lot more microphones or a lot more cameras or more things wireless, and so you can be a certain amount of unencumbered and make these performances incredibly dynamic. So 5G is the next big one that we're looking towards. As for what comes after that, who knows? I think that Eurovision is always something that's going to be trying to innovate, not only because it makes the performances seem more spectacular, but because it's really in the lifeblood of Eurovision. Ever since it's begun, like I say, it's never been content to say, we're doing the same thing as last year. Every year, it's got to be bigger, it's got to be better. What that means in terms of budgeting, I'm not going to try and comment on, but I think it must be quite a scary prospect to actually win Eurovision and go, oh my goodness, we have to put this on next year, and even more so.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, some countries seem to have deliberately sabotaged themselves to avoid winning it again, haven't they?
I will not speak to.
Or at least, like, maybe they weren't. Maybe that was their best performance. I don't know. So I've got a whole range of things, but I think we've got to the kind of natural point. We've gone through 1950s to now, and kind of a bit of a look at the future. I'm interested if there are any other questions from the audience or online. Yes, straight away. If you just wait for the microphone so people at home can hear. Thank you.
Okay, so just take you back to the start, and thanks very much for the talk, by the way. Just take you back to the start, you said that Eurovision was a concept for European countries, and someone came up with the idea of a song contest. And now we talk about Eurovision being a song contest. If it hadn't worked, or if they hadn't thought of the idea, what would Eurovision be, do you think? And does it do anything else apart from the song contest?
So yes, the television network, the European Broadcasting Union, they still exist. They do a lot of large-scale things. It's often around sporting events, and getting like football televised across Europe and things like that. And in the early days, that was a big part of it as well. Live sport and the song contest itself, they tend to be the big hitters now. But there's still some use of equipment, some sharing cross borders. In terms of the song contest itself, it is like an old adage for Eurovision that if it hadn't been invented then, it would not be invented now. Because can you imagine trying to pitch to someone an incredibly expensive contest that moves country every single year and requires so much setup and has all these different kinds of people and performers participating? It's the sort of thing that sounds completely ludicrous if it hadn't already existed.
Absolutely. Any other questions from the audience? Yes. Sorry. Just here first. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you very much, Lewis. That's really fascinating. I think we're all on our way to Bradford soon. My question is, obviously the song contest is becoming a little bit more of a political football, and also because of its reach, it's something that could be targeted for political reasons, etc. How do they manage that on a broadcast level? The potential for people storming the stage, demonstrating, booing, etc.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, and one thing that even though this is an exhibition focused mostly on the technology behind Eurovision, we're still having that conversation about how Eurovision is and has been controversial in the past. It's definitely not something new, and it's something that might surprise people that basically as long as Eurovision has existed, there have been people who want to protest the concepts behind it, or perhaps, as we said before, some of the voting. There have been examples of, armed snipers at different Eurovisions going back decades. It's always been, I suppose, as is true with any large-scale organization or event, it's the sort of thing where you need to have high levels of security and a strong idea of how you're going to respond to different political themes. So, sorry if that doesn't really answer your question. It's I think very important to know that even though Eurovision has seen its controversies in recent years, it's not particularly new for Eurovision. It's something that has kind of always existed in some shape or form.
Over there.
Thank you, Lewis. Very, very interesting talk. I've got kind of a two-part question, bearing in mind that curators never quite get everything that they want into an exhibition. What is the one thing that you've managed to get in that you would take home if you were allowed? And what is the one thing you wished we could have got hold of if money, permissions and time were no object?
What's the one thing you did take home and no one knows?
I think in both instances, I'd talk about costumes. So actually, one thing I'd love to take home is a fan-made costume. Someone has made for their child. Maybe it's a bit too much of a spoiler, but they've made the jacket worn by Curator a few years ago. The beautiful green PVC thing. Like, seeing that on stage is one thing. Seeing a version in real life is another. And even though I, of course, never would, it was a great shame that it wouldn't fit me even if I wanted to try it on. But I think if budget had allowed more costumes, because trying to get them shipped from across Europe is a very expensive process, and actually it's quite sad. A lot of early costumes don't survive because, again, people didn't know that Eurovision would become this massive cultural juggernaut, and so you have examples where I would talk about buying their costumes in a charity shop, but there are a lot of like early outfits where someone's like, oh yeah, I wore that and it was mine, and then I wore it again until it was no longer useful. And so there are a number of costumes where we've been virtually traveling across Europe, talking to people's representation, saying, "Oh, it'd be absolutely lovely if we could have this," and they say, "Oh no, it simply doesn't exist anymore." So, in my dream of dreams, there would be a wonderful Eurovision museum that has all the costumes across time, but unfortunately, it's not meant to be. So, it's one thing I would say to any prospective Eurovision star is hold on to your costume because people are going to recognize you for it and want to see it again.
Any other questions right now? Yeah.
Hi, Lewis. I just want to ask about, so we've got the Eurovision Song Contest that you're obviously exhibiting. Have you gone in on the broadcast, on the exhibition, on the museum, to the other events that are part of the Eurovision family? So I'm thinking of the Junior Song Contest, the Choir of the Year, the Young Musicians, Young Dancers. Do you have anything from that? Is that mentioned at all? Particularly maybe thinking juniors, if it's an exhibition to inspire children.
Yes, so it's not something we're delving into in any great detail. We are mentioning the scope of what the European Broadcasting Union does and has done in the past. But in all honesty, it was very difficult just distilling the parts of Eurovision we're talking about into something that could fit into our gallery spaces without taking over the entire museum. As we say, we've picked one decade one innovation per decade of the Song Contest life, and that was us being very, very cutthroat. We're saying we'll talk about this. We don't have time or space to talk about this. So it's the sort of thing where I would love a follow-up exhibition. I mean, I'm always pitching that we do more broadcast exhibitions. So it might be something that we see in future years, especially if this exhibition proves to be very popular. I think it's the sort of thing where people aren't necessarily expecting an exhibition about Eurovision. It's one thing we've been quite surprised by during the development of this. There have been small exhibitions about aspects of Eurovision, or particularly around ABBA, as massive names in Eurovision. But to our knowledge, there's never really been a Eurovision exhibition, especially covering the topics we're covering. So here's hoping it's the start of ongoing celebrations.
Amazing. While thinking about more questions in the room, I wanted to ask so there's clearly going to be a lot of cool, nerdy kit, some kind of ridiculous but very fun interactivity, as well as some amazing costumes, all this sort of thing. But Eurovision is kind of really made by the people, isn't it? In the sense of, and that's kind of obviously the performers, the audience, and then all that kind of behind the scenes, people who kind of make it happen. Do we get to hear from them at all as part of the exhibition?
Yes, very much so. So we have interviews with people behind the Song Contest that will be present in the exhibition. People talking about the experience of making the contest happen, or what it is like to work on something like Eurovision, as well as a lot of behind the scenes like videos that have been recorded over the years, particularly by the European Broadcasting Union, even down to how long it takes to set up an entire stage that could be used for 40 different performers, each with different props and each with different requirements. So yeah, it's something that we're really keen to get the sort of the faces of the people behind the scenes on screen and in the exhibition just as much as the people who appear on stage during the performance.
And do you go much into the kind of that European and global fan base? Do they get a kind of a part of the action?
Yeah, so largely we're talking about the UK side of the fandom, partly for logistical sake. So we went out to the OGAE's annual Eurobash that they have every year. We sent some of my colleagues up to that this year, or I suppose at the end of last year, to record that and have some interviews with the fans. But one thing that we're really keen to showcase is cheesily we call it we met through Eurovision, and it's people who have made lifelong friends or found interesting relationships across international borders I should say, through their love of Eurovision. It's something that really does break down walls between people, the shared love for the Song Contest. So yeah, it's something we're definitely highlighting.
Amazing. And I think going back to the question we had before, actually, and you made me think, you kind of mentioned it being quite cutthroat, one innovation per decade. Which are the ones that's kind of like a film editing, kind of the things that end up left on the cutting room floor? What are the things that you are gutted aren't going to be there, if you're allowed to share that?
It's a good question. I think one thing that we were really interested in exploring, but was incredibly technical, was the prospect of outside broadcasting. So this is having trucks absolutely stuffed with equipment that drive to different broadcasting locations, and what it's like working in one of those or living out of one of those for the contest, the duration of the contest. And we do have examples of outside broadcasting trucks in our collections, including at the Science and Innovation Park, where you all are now, which are absolutely wonderful, but they're absolutely massive, and we have no space in the museum to be showcasing something like that. So that is something that is incredibly nerdy and something I'm really interested in. Definitely doesn't involve any sort of sequins or glamour in that sense, but it's one thing that I'm really interested in and like to show off.
Amazing. Any more questions in the room? Yes, at the front.
Thank you. A really interesting talk. You've talked a lot about the innovations that have become almost accepted. I wonder if you've got anything in the exhibition about innovations that have been tried and failed, and just been used once or perhaps twice, and then quietly dropped.
Not in a massive way. I think it can be really interesting in terms of, when I said about converting broadcasting standards. There was a time when France had, comparative to the rest of Europe, an absolutely ludicrously high definition broadcasting system, maybe twice as good as anywhere else, which really made for a problem of converting across to different places. And it's something they actually dropped after a number of years and went to basically being in line with the rest of Europe. But that is a very, very technical answer. There aren't really that many examples of innovations I can think of, or that we've really explored during the course of this, that haven't found their way into a performance in some way, shape, or form. It is really interesting to see, even to this day, what things are used commonly and which ones aren't. Like, I might watch a Eurovision now and see someone who is just standing there in front of a microphone on a stand and thinking, wow, that's a very different idea to someone who's got, a headset mic and they're dancing around on the stage. What are they trying to convey in their performance by what they're using, not what they're not using? And I often wonder, the people who help build the performances, each country has its own team saying, right, here's what we want this amount of pyrotechnics, and we need a smoke machine, and we need someone who is, dressed as a dragon on stage, and absolutely all sorts. I wonder how much those people must compare notes, because surely you must be thinking, is my song good enough? Does it have a man emerging out of a giant egg made of denim shorts? How am I going to make my thing as spectacular as everyone else's? And so maybe it's not in terms of innovations, but I am always just really interested in what trends sort of crop up here and there, and maybe see a revitalization and then they drop off again, or someone's harking back to a different time. We saw in, I want to say 2020, was it last year? Maybe 25 or 24. Again, they blurred together. Luxembourg's performance, Le Poupée monte le son. That was very much about responding to the song Puppet on a String from decades prior. And I think it's really interesting that Eurovision has so much history now that it can reference itself. It's been so key in building up our popular culture that now you can get people responding to previous songs in Eurovision, and we go, oh yes, I understand what you're referencing there, or perhaps I don't understand what you're referencing, but I still enjoy the song.
So, are there? Do put your hands up at any point. But I'm interested. Well, how long is the gallery going to be there? Is it kind of a use for permanent gallery? Is it there for a short time? And are you going to do? Is there going to be any other programming going on? Any other events related to it, or is it kind of just a static thing?
No, definitely not. We're not a static kind of museum. So the exhibition opens early May and it closes, I want to say, February 2027. It might be a little bit later than that, but it's going to be open for about 10 months, perhaps longer. We shall see. And during the course of the year, we have a whole team of people who make events happen. And so it's not something I'm massively involved in myself, so I don't want to hype up too much that I'm not going to be present for. But we have, for example, we're planning on having a watch party at the museum when the actual broadcast happens. We are lucky enough at our museum to have multiple cinema screens, so we'd love to use one of those to make a big watch party. But there will be things going on over the course of the year, touching on different aspects of the exhibition. So again, like I said, a lot of it will be about inspiring young people, either whether they want to become a Eurovision performer, or they want to become someone behind the scenes, or they want to become, a music critic, a member of the jury, or perhaps they just want to watch Eurovision this year and next year. There'll be events surrounding that. There'll be events surrounding the fandom, and there'll be absolutely all sorts going on, because yes, we don't just end an exhibition. There'll be online content, there'll be blogs and articles, and we'll be working with people throughout the year to really be celebrating Eurovision in this landmark moment of it turning 70 years old.
Amazing. Yes, question at the back. Do get questions in online as well.
Yeah,
We'll come to
this is a technical question. You've talked about difficulties with compatibility and France being one of the holdouts. Two parts. One is, are there anyone still in Eurovision who is a problem in terms of compatibility? And are there any countries not in Eurovision who, if they were to join, would be a technical rather than a political problem?
I'm going to be honest, this is not something I'm super confident in answering, so please take what I say with a pinch of salt. But essentially, Eurovision these days comes with a whole host of experts. So when a country wins the song contest and will perform the next year, often they will draw upon the expertise of people who put together previous song contests. And there is actually a whole host of folks who essentially move around every year to lend their experience and expertise to the new host country. And so I think these days it's a lot easier for someone to join in and participate, and there's so much more expertise in making that happen. Whether a country would join and say, actually, we're going to do it in our own way and you're all going to have to get on board with that, I'm not so certain about. But I think these days it's much easier to change across national boundaries, across standards and things like that. So even if the technology isn't a perfect match, there are people who are very, very good at their jobs who make it happen.
Yeah, so I think, unless I hear screams, time for one more question. Yep.
Lewis, me again, sorry. Just to say, you said there about like a country wanting to do it on their own. Portugal did exactly that. They didn't import a single person when they hosted it in 2018. It was an entirely Portuguese team. I sort of have a question. It's maybe a bit of a plea. Maybe it's a bit, I don't know what it is. So you're exhibiting about the artist that got nothing, got 0 points. So I think my question is, or just something to throw into that, is to remember that those people are real people and they went to a song contest and they performed their hearts out and the result didn't go the way that they were. So I would just want to ask you to bear that in mind and not be that a gallery for mocking.
Absolutely, yes, and apologies. I'm being glib for the purposes of this talk, but no, we are approaching everything sensibly. Like, these are people who, they put themselves out there in front of a crowd of millions of people watching at home. It's an incredible achievement to be on that stage, regardless of points after that.
Right.
And one thing that we're trying to explore in the Nil Poir Jukebox is not just saying this song is terrible, but saying, you know, trying to revisit the idea and get people to listen to those songs that have been said to be terrible and make their own opinion on it and give people that chance. So yes, I completely agree with you. It's not just myself. We have a whole host of colleagues in what we call our Open for All committee, whose whole existence is to make sure that we're approaching every topic sensibly and always celebrating people and not mocking people.
Good, thank
There
you.
is there is a tradition in Eurovision, isn't there, of always being poking fun and sometimes poking too much fun, I would argue. So yes, it's not something we want to recreate in our gallery.
Yeah, I think there's a place for poking fun and having fun with the contest. I work with and am friends with one of the acts that got 0 points, and they take it in absolute great, like, humor and everything, and can be very self-deprecating about it themselves, but they're not, some others are not like that.
Yeah. Please pass on my congratulations to your friend then, that, you know, they were on that stage. What an amazing thing to be able to say.
Yeah, I think for a brief time I worked for the Science Museum, and not in exhibitions, so I was never given any responsibility for creating something like this, but I was in some of those meetings, and these sorts of issues get debated and discussed at length, how they deal with these sorts of issues. So yeah, I think it's a point well made, and a point that I know they will have gone through in great detail, and I think it kind of brings it back to that whole what Eurovision is about, and we kind of did that whole, we love to kind of mock it, we also love it, and there's that kind of, we also just think it's brilliant, and so yeah, it sounds like it's a really interesting take and a kind of overall a celebration of this cultural phenomenon. Which is a cultural phenomenon in our country, but just over the world. So it does sound amazing. So I'm definitely going to be up there to see it. I just want to close, give you a kind of final word, really, to close. Is there, if you can do this, it's like choosing favourite children, but what is the one bit, if there is, of the gallery that you are most excited either to see for yourself there or for other people to see?
Oh, that is a really, really difficult question. I think, as with all our exhibitions, we really want to showcase our collections as best as possible. And it's one thing, all of you who are going to be going on a tour soon, I think that's an absolutely wonderful thing. Like I say, my background is one of our stores. We do tours here at Bradford. Our collections in the Science Museum group are about 7 million objects. And whatever we can show is always a tiny, tiny fragment of that. And so the opportunity to take some of these world-class things and put them on show, sometimes for the very first time, because of how limited we are in how many exhibitions we can do per year, that is what I exist for. My job, I always say as a curator, is to find cool things. And if I can make you say, yes, that is a cool thing, then I've done my job right. So that's what I'm most excited about. And that's why I'll be wandering around the exhibition, maybe in disguise, and overhearing, hopefully, people saying, wow, this is a great exhibition. I didn't know this, and I'm having a wonderful time. So please do come and join us in May or any time before February next year. And I hope you do really enjoy the exhibition, which will be absolutely free, as our museum is as well. And yeah, please come to Bradford and enjoy yourselves.
Brilliant. Thank you. I mean, that's kind of all we've got time for. I think it does sound absolutely amazing. And I think we'll probably all be going up to Bradford, so hopefully you bump into you over there. So we'll be going on tours, hopefully seeing some very cool things. I mean, I think the thing about museums is you can always tell a story, but what this does and what that guy does is brings it back to the real thing, which kind of makes it really special. So I just want to thank you all for coming. Thank you to the Science Innovation Park for having us, and for our AV guys as well. And really, the big thanks go to Lewis Pollard for an amazing talk. So thank you very much. Thank you.